Hi guys, this video is about file parsing in Talend, and we'll be going through different file parsers that Talend supports. It supports basically a large variety of file parsers including CSV, Excel, JSON, XML and many more. So we're going to discuss these in detail in this tutorial. So before moving on, let me explain that I've divided this video tutorial in two different parts. One is going to be the basic file parsers, and it will include single schema file parsers. Uh, so files in which we have a single type of schema or a single consistent schema, they're going to be dealt using the basic parsers. And for this, Talend supports or Talend provides CSV, Excel, JSON, XML, and then we have regular expression parser. And then if a file is a positional file, so that it means the schema has been maintained based on position of the fields, then we have a separate parser for that. And then we have input raw and t file input full row. So if we want to read a file row by row, and then we have some multi-schema file parsers. For example, we have multi-schema parser for positional files, for delimited files, and for XML files. And let me clear three things here. So number one, this video tutorial is going to be discussing the basic single schema file parsers, and I'm going to create a second video afterwards, and that will be focusing only on the multi-schema file parsers. And then afterwards there are going to be a series of different tutorials focusing on hands-on experience and practical demonstration for configuring these components, in which we'll just get some sample data and we'll set up the configuration details, and then we'll execute the data, execute the files, and execute the integration jobs in Talend Studio, and then we'll be seeing the results. That they're going to be much detailed, but they're all going to be follow-up activities. Now let's dive into the details. And as I previously said, the next tutorial will be focusing on multi-schema file parsing in Talend, and for this let's stay on single schema. So the first parser, I would say, let's start with the basics, and that we have this delimited files. So these files are having multiple fields separated by different set of delimiters. For example, we have comma, we have semicolon, we have pipes, or we have many other delimiters. And these files are famous since quite a long time, and still today they are considered as the most basic and I would say the most widely used files for basic data management. And for this, if we want to read the data from a file, so we have a t file input delimited component. With this component we read the file, and we set all configuration details inside the file. We set the schema inside this component, and in the output we're going to get all fields that we have in this file. And the second thing is, sometimes we have the data already inside the flow of the Talend integration job. So for that we need t extract delimited fields. It means this component is going to get like a string of data, and then it's going to output multiple fields based on the delimiter. And yeah, that's the interesting thing, dynamic schema. But unfortunately this feature is only being provided in the enterprise Talend Studio version. So if you're using open or free studio, then you won't be having access to dynamic schema feature. But for paid version we have this feature, and we're going to see that in the follow-up video tutorials. So the next parser, that's Microsoft Excel files. And so we know Excel files, they contains a lot of different tabs, and we're going to have a tabular format of the data, like multiple rows and columns. And we have this t file input Excel component, in which we set the starting column and the ending column, and then we define the schema, and then we proceed to read the data. And for sure we have this dynamic schema functionality also available for Excel files, and we have the option And there's another very powerful feature inside this component, so we can read different tabs based on regular expressions. For example, we can see here 4 tabs: east, west, north and south. So we can set up the regular expression that if the name of the tab is starting with S, then only reads that tab and not the other ones. So there are, yeah, some really interesting details about the configuration. So the next file is Xml files, and we have tfile input XML, the basic component for reading data from the file, and then we need to configure some file looping pointers, which are going to then parse the data, and output will be multiple fields. For example, we can say file name, file path, file length, based on the data that you can see in this on the screen right now. And we have a separate component, t-extract XML fields. So as I said previously, file input components are only used to read data from a file, and if we have the data already in the flow, in the subsequent components we want to get the data processed, then we need to have separate components, and for that we have these t-extract fields. For example, in this case, t-extract XML fields. And then we have JSON files, and for JSON we have tfile input JSON, the basic component for configuring the file looping pointer, and for then basically defining the schema, and then we forward the data. But sometimes, for example, when we have some complex fields, so we use tfile input JSON component to parse the JSON file, and we come up with 5 fields, but we know that the 5th field is again itself a JSON component which needs to be parsed further, so that like sort of drill down parsing or granular parsing cannot be done using this tfile input JSON component. For this thing we have a separate component, t-extract JSON fields. So those fields which are still parsable are to be forwarded to this t-extract JSON fields, and this is going to parse those fields, and later on we can use a tmap component to merge the data from both of these components, and then we just output it. Apart from that, we have these regular expressions which are very powerful to parse data, and sometimes when we have files with very complicated schemas, so we can use this tfile input regular expression component. We use this component and we basically parse multiple fields of a file. For example, in this case, let's suppose we have 5 or 6 fields. So we define the schema first, and we then write the regular expressions, and every expression is going to parse one field, and this is going to leverage the potential of regular expression with the Talend built-in features. And we have this t-extract regular expression fields component. So once again, if you're reading the data from a file and you want to parse it right away, then you have this input component. If the data is already in the flow, maybe for example you have the data in 3rd or 4th component from start, then we want to parse it, and we use t-extract regular expression fields component. Then we have this tfile input full row component. So sometimes we don't want to parse the data right away, rather we read it line by line, and maybe we want to parse it later on using a tjava row component by writing some custom Java code, or maybe we want to parse it with another component like t-extract delimited fields. So we can do that stuff, or maybe we're trying to get it inside a tmap component, and we want to extract some fields from it. So for this one, we can read the row line by line using this component, and then we pass it on. And on top of that, we have this tfile input raw component. It reads entire data of the file in one single string, and then we write the string somewhere else, or maybe we can write it in the database, we can write it in an email component, and we can send it as some email details data. But for this we already have this component. The output is a single string. uh, Sometimes we have this. Okay, so now we talk about this positional files. So what are positional files? So when we maintain data inside files based on their positions, for example, we say we have the first row, and inside this row we have first 15 characters, or first 15 values allotted for some specific field. Then we have the next 15 places for the next field. Then we have next 10 or 11 fields, 10 or 11 spaces for the next field. For example, so we see this file as it's shown on the screen right now. So we have a sample file, and the data is starting from position 1 and position 15. That's the last position for the first field, which is contract. It means we should know in advance what's the maximum length of this field, and in this case we know it's going to be from 1 till 15. The largest number is going to be of 15 characters, so we allot this space to that. And then we have customer reference. It's going to be 15 digits starting from position 16 to 30, and then we have from 31 to 4. So for such type of files we use dfile input positional component, and we define the parser stating that first 15 digits have to be taken for the first field, the next, and then we move on. And then basically we define the schema for this one. And we have this t-extract positional fields component also. With this component we can parse the data in subsequent components of the data flow. So as I previously said, the next video is going to be on multi-schema file parsing, and we're going to see the three major schema, the multi-schema file parsers in Talend. So thanks a lot for watching the video. Subscribe and stay tuned.